Okay, so picture this. We go through our entire lives just absorbing facts, beliefs, and understandings. But how often do we actually hit the pause button and ask, wait, how do I actually know what I know? Are we just trusting our eyes? Are we relying on pure logic, a sudden gut feeling, or maybe a higher moral framework? In this explainer, we're going to completely break down the four main paths of human knowledge. We'll explore how we get it, how we validate it, and most importantly, how to tell the difference between a daily assumption and a rigorous scientific truth. Let's get right into it. So, here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with the origins of our knowledge, then jump into empiricism, which is all about learning from experience, and rationalism, where reason rules. After that, we'll check out intuition and revelation, and wrap it all up by pitting everyday common sense against hard scientific knowledge.
All right, let's dive right into this with Section 1, the origins of our knowledge. Let me throw a question at you. Think about a super basic, rock-solid fact. How do you actually know that water boils at exactly 100 degrees Celsius? Seriously, think about it for a second. Did you personally stick a thermometer in a pot? Or did you just trust a science textbook? Did a teacher tell you? This seemingly simple question gets right to the heart of epistemology, which is really just a fancy word for the study of knowledge. Well, the truth is, the answer isn't just one single path. We actually build our reality through a mix of sensory experience, logical deduction, deep intuitive feelings, and foundational moral beliefs. These four channels are quite literally the main philosophical tools we use to understand our world. So let's unpack each one of them. Moving on to Section 2, empiricism or learning from experience. So, empiricism is this philosophical school of thought that says all human knowledge comes strictly from sensory experience. We're talking observation and experiments, basically what you can see, hear, touch, taste, and smell. For an empiricist, if you want the real truth about the world, you gotta observe it physically. Going back to our water example, you know it boils at 100 degrees because you, or someone else, literally observed and measured that physical event happening in real time. Which brings us to a massive, game-changing idea in philosophy, championed by thinkers like John Locke, David Hume, and Francis Bacon. They argued that when you are born, your mind is a tabula rasa, a completely blank slate. You aren't preloaded with an operating system full of universal facts. Instead, every single experience you have literally writes the script of your mind. It's like you're building your own personal database of knowledge, one observation at a time. To really ground this theory, let's look at how we learn language. How on earth do we know that the word went is the past tense of go? An empiricist would say, well, it's because you've repeatedly heard people say it, or you've read it in books over and over again in the real world. We pick up this language rule empirically, just through the sheer repetitive force of sensory input. But hey, what happens when our senses trick us? Optical illusions fool our eyes all the time, right? That brings us to Section 3. Rationalism, relying on reason. Rationalism completely flips the script on empiricism. It argues that the true, absolute source of certain knowledge is reason, or ratio, through logical, deductive reasoning, not our physical senses. Rationalists are quick to point out that our eyes and ears can easily deceive us. So for them, strict logic and systematic thinking are the absolute kings of truth. The mind is what matters most. And you literally can't talk about rationalism without bringing up René Descartes. This guy famously doubted absolutely everything, his senses, his own body, his entire reality, until he hit one undeniable, rock-solid truth. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. He knew he existed simply because he possessed the mental capacity to actively doubt it. It's a huge pillar of rationalist thought. Ultimate truth begins with the intellect. Let's bring language back into it to see this in action. Think about how you make a newly invented English noun plural. You just add an S, right? Book becomes books. The crazy thing is, you don't need to empirically hear every single plural word on the planet to know this. Your mind uses deductive reasoning. You learn the broad grammatical rule once, and bam, your logic effortlessly applies it to totally new situations without needing a physical sensory experience every single time. Now, our human experience is obviously way richer than just raw data and cold calculation. So let's move to Section 4, intuition and the guidance of revelation. First up here is intuition. The French philosopher Henri Bergson talked about this as a way of knowing reality that logic and the senses alone just can't fully grasp. Intuition is when you understand something directly, without any long, drawn-out process of reasoning. It's that sudden flash of insight. It doesn't come from a strict logical deduction, but usually emerges from a deep, internalized experience that's just been marinating in your subconscious. Here's a highly relatable example from the source material. Imagine a veteran teacher in a classroom. They can often just feel when a student is struggling. The kid hasn't raised their hand, there's no test score proving they're failing, but through years of internalized experience, that teacher has developed a pedagogical sixth sense. Their intuition instantly picks up on a tiny, subtle shift in the student's expression or posture. Then we have revelation. This is knowledge that believers hold as originating from God, delivered through prophets and sacred scriptures. Now, unlike human observation or logic, which can definitely be flawed, revelation is viewed as absolute truth. It gives us those overarching moral and ethical frameworks, things like the fundamental importance of honesty or justice, that human faculties just can't inherently generate on their own.
And a really crucial point made here is that reason and revelation actually don't have to be enemies. They can beautifully complement each other. We use our intellect to understand and interpret these teachings, so the absolute values of honesty or moral responsibility from revelation become the ethical bedrock for, say, how a scientist conducts a research study or how a teacher treats their students. They work totally hand in hand to build a complete worldview.
And this brilliantly sets us up for our final segment, Section 5, Common sense versus scientific knowledge. Let's put everyday common sense right up against scientific knowledge. Common sense is usually spontaneous, handed down over time, and it's rarely rigorously tested. The classic example? Drinking coconut water to cure a fever just because the elders always said so. I mean, it might actually work, but we don't definitively know why. On the flip side, we have scientific knowledge. This is rigorous. If a researcher takes that same coconut water, runs a controlled experiment, analyzes the hard data, and publishes it for others to verify, boom, that common myth is transformed into verified scientific knowledge. So, the crucial point here is that scientific knowledge rests on three unshakable pillars. First, it's gotta be systematic. No random guesswork allowed. Second, it has to be strictly logical in its reasoning. And third, which is the absolute biggest one, it must be verifiable. Anyone, anywhere in the world should be able to run your exact same procedures and get the exact same results. All right, let's bring this whole shebang together. We essentially have four unique tools in our mental toolbox. We use empiricism and our physical senses to grasp hard facts, like boiling water. We use rationalism and logic to understand broad structural systems, like grammar rules. We tap into intuition for that deep, immediate human connection, like a teacher sensing a struggling student. And many look to revelation for their foundational moral compass. Every single one plays a specific, absolutely vital role in how we make sense of the universe. And that wraps up our explainer, but I want to leave you with the thought. The next time you're scrolling through your feed, or you hear a rumor, or you learn a new concept, take a quick pause. Ask yourself, am I relying on everyday common sense here, empirical data, or rational deduction? Now that you've got this mental toolkit, which method are you going to use to test the truth of the very next fact you stumble across? Stay curious, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.